Hey everybody, I'm here with my buddy Kevin Naranjo, and we're standing in a place that you can probably recognize. It's church, and I know that the message that you preached is, what it takes for God to use you in 2020. And when people see a church and a place like this, what have you come to understand? People often assume you have to be able to be like or do in order to be used by God.
Sure, definitely. I think, Bill, really people fall in maybe kind of one of two camps. Number one, I think people sometimes feel like if I'm not the pastor or if I'm not the worship leader, then if I'm not the one that's up on stage, then maybe I'm not really doing a work of God or can be used by God. So I think sometimes people fall into that camp.
Yeah.
But I think also sometimes people will feel like, well, I'm just, nobody important. I'm kind of a nobody. Or maybe they feel like they've made too many mistakes in their past and they're too broken to be used by God. And quite frankly, when we look at the accounts of the Bible and the people that God has used in the past and has used, from 2,000 years ago all the way up until today, we simply see that that's not true, that God can use just regular people who maybe have made mistakes in their past, but He can still take those people and do great things in and through their lives.
Yeah, I've literally had conversations with people at times that maybe I've done a teaching of even on something like spiritual gifts, and people I've known for years would come to me and say, I don't think I have one of those. And it's almost surprising how people believe like, well, I don't qualify. I'm not,
Sure.
I'm here, but God's not going to use me. I love your message because it reminds us of the opposite of that. Could you give a brief summary of what does it take, these four things that end up reminding us of one thing mainly, to be used by God?
So when we looked at the different accounts of the Bible, and we looked at basically kind of four different kinds of people that God can use. We looked at first that God can use the ordinary. Now I use David as the example from the Bible, but there's many examples that are in the Bible of ordinary people. But David, when David's dad was approached by Samuel the prophet, and said, God had told him, hey, one of your sons is going to be the next king. David's dad brought all of his sons together except for David. David was so ordinary that his own dad didn't even think to bring him to the lineup. Of course, we know how that turned out, that all the other sons were passed over until David's dad, Jesse, did bring him there. And God said, yes, this is going to be the next king. And I think for me, the takeaway from that is chances are none of us are going to be this famous, superstar person in our lives.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that God can't use us. If we will be faithful and just and serve God the way that He wants us to. God can take ordinary people just like me and you and do extraordinary things with them, and so that's I think that's a big takeaway for us. We also talked about the fact that God can use the broken, and the example that I used was the woman at the well. Again, many examples throughout the Bible of God taking someone who had made a mistake or who was broken in some way and use them in a great way. In this particular case, the woman at the well, her brokenness showed up as broken relationships. Right. She had been married 5 times, as we read in the text, and was actually living with the guy that she was currently with.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that happened with her was once she encountered Jesus, and once she had that talk with Him, and she realized who He was, she didn't remain in her brokenness, if you will.
Sure.
She then went back to the town, and she told all the other people in her village. They then came and talked to Jesus as well. And the Bible says that many people were saved because of her, and then because of them ultimately talking with Jesus. And for me, the big takeaway for that is whether we admit it or not, whether we think about it or not, we are all broken in some way, shape, or form. Now, my brokenness may not look like yours.
Sure.
Yours may not look like the brokenness of the woman in the well, but we are all broken. And the takeaway for me is if we will lay our brokenness at the feet of Jesus, that he will take those broken pieces and he can just mold them into something beautiful. And then if we will then allow that to become part of our redemption story, and then we can go out and tell others about that. And then what that I think what that helps do is just to show the power and the mercy and the love of Jesus. And then when we go out and we share that story, that just makes his name more famous.
Absolutely. If we're just awesome, they see us.
That's
but
right.
if they see our brokenness, but then see him through that, that's what changes lives.
That's right.
It's awesome.
That's right. That's right. And then we also talked about to not let excuses hold us back. And I thought the most obvious case for that was going to be Moses. Moses, God called him to lead the Israelites out of bondage, out of captivity, and Moses didn't just go, "Oh, that's awesome, Lord, thanks for choosing me." No, he had a laundry list of excuses. He just went down the list. Well, who am I, and who are you, and what about if they don't believe me, and just list after thing after thing after thing, and then he even says send somebody else. I'm not good with words and all those type of things, but God was still able to use Moses in a great and mighty way. And if we're honest with each other, we oftentimes will come up with excuses as well. We'll be like, well, God, I don't have time for that, or I don't know enough about the Bible to lead a small group, and just all kinds of excuses that we may come up with. But I promise you that if you will just listen to God and follow him, trust him, and step out on faith, He's going to see you through it. I heard somebody say one time that God will not call you to what he won't also see you through.
I like that.
And so I'm positive that if you'll just follow through and do what God's called you to do, that he can use you in a great and mighty way. And then finally, we talked about just giving God your yes. And that's really, for me, that's just the blank check of saying, God, I believe you're wanting to use me. I know that you want to use me, and I'm here. I'm yours to be used.
Awesome.
I'm going to be a vessel for you. And I think that if we will do that, then God can use us in great and mighty ways.
One of the biggest quotes I heard in college on campus ministry, it was like a mantra. I heard it over and over again. I've not heard it in a while, but you saying that reminded me. I heard this a million times. God does not want your ability. He wants your availability. And when I hear you say, just give him the blank check, the yes, and he'll fill it in, he'll do the rest. That's, I think, what that's teaching. And of course, I love this, your points, he uses the ordinary, broken, those who do away with excuses, and then put your yes, O-B-E-Y. The big next step that you preached on is, it's just simply obeying. And it's not a fun word, but it's just doing what he's asked you to do and believing that if I do this, he's got the rest.
That's right. That's right.
Man, I really hope whoever listens to your message, watches this video, that they don't just see this as like, yeah, that sounds really cool and tweetable or whatever and inspiring, but legitimately, if you're ordinary, if you're broken, if you've been making excuses, he's still calling you and can use you in a big way. So I know as you meet together in your group now, there's going to be some really cool questions that Kevin helped formulate for you guys to discuss that I think would be kind of cool. If I'm sitting in my small group, if we always say, all right, let's put it out on the table. What's your excuse right now?
That's right.
Have some good discussion that way. Any final thoughts about what you would encourage those in the small groups right now as they talk about this?
Well, for me, really, it's just we all fall into one of those categories, maybe all of those categories of being ordinary, broken. We all have made excuses, and so for me, the tough question is will we give God our yes? So as you guys go through these questions and hopefully get some good discussion going within your groups. just be honest
Yeah.
with each other. I mean, because we're all in the same boat. We all struggle with sometimes feeling too ordinary and just maybe kind of feel like Moses did, like we're a nobody. We all struggle with brokenness, and we, like you said, we've all made excuses. And so, since we're all in the same boat, let's just kind of lay it all out there, talk about that, but also remembering that through all of that, that if we're faithful and just obey what God's called us to do, that He can use us in a great and mighty way.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's what I love about small groups, because you get in that circle, you just get real with each other. And I know, sometimes that it takes a journey to get there, to be willing to be that open. But imagine a place where we just sit down and say, here's my brokenness. Here's the excuses I've made. Here's why I don't think God may want to use me. And you talk that out, and the encouragement you get from one another, and sharing those stories, and then praying for one another at the end. I think that's huge and powerful. I know this to be true. I believe God is about to do great things in and through you personally, in and through your group, and through the church. So I just think He's waiting for you to put your yes on the table and be obedient. So appreciate you challenging and inspiring us in that direction. Enjoy some great discussion and prayer time together as a small group, and give Him your yes and be ready to be used by Him. Thanks, bro.
All right.